we expected, as overnight, several local forums in Anning Town, as well as some city media accounts, were flooded with harshly worded articles featuring sensationalist headlines designed to spark outrage. They asked where a lone young man got $500,000 for an illegal construction project right next to the airport. The articles claimed to reveal the capital behind the Cloud Hotel, sounding a safety alarm about a building less than 100 meters from the runway. They argued it would be a massive hazard for future flights, painting Fu Qing as a greedy holdout with a mysterious, suspicious background. He was portrayed as a man who ignored public safety for money, while the text heavily implied that his loans were obtained through illicit means. The reports even went as far as to suggest he had improper dealings with both the bank and the airport authorities. Everyone involved was being dragged through the mud as these articles spread across the internet like a digital virus. The public began to whisper that there was no way a young man could have such power on his own. Surely, someone was backing him. They waited to see how he would handle the fallout, while Li Shun, naturally, took great pleasure in the chaos unfolding around him. He spent his time forwarding the articles to various WeChat groups, adding his own inflammatory comments to the fire. He claimed that disaster follows those who lack virtue, and soon, this negative public opinion reached the airport project headquarters. Qin Shou called Fu Qing immediately, his voice thick with anxiety as he asked if he had seen the articles circulating online. He warned that the leadership was under immense pressure, but Fu Qing responded with a voice that remained remarkably steady. He told Qin Shou that he would handle the situation, believing that the truth would eventually come to light, and then hung up. Before he could even catch his breath, Uncle Zhao found him, looking absolutely furious at the blatant bullying they were facing. When Fu Qing asked what was wrong, Uncle Zhao explained with great indignation what had just happened at the construction site. A company called Hongfa Construction had sent people to their site specifically to poach the experienced masters working under him. They offered double the wages plus full benefits, and Fu Qing's heart sank when he heard that some of the younger workers were already tempted. He sought out those young workers, but he didn't scold them. Instead, he looked at them calmly and told them he understood their position. He told them that if they wished to leave, he wouldn't stop them, and every cent of their wages would be paid in full. However, he warned that the doors of the Cloud Hotel would never open for them again, before turning away from the group. The young men stood there looking at one another, but in the end, not a single one left. They weren't fools, after all. They could see who was truly building a future and who was just there to cause destruction, so Uncle Zhao's team held firm. But as we often see, new trouble followed immediately, and the very next day, he received a formal court summons. A company he had never even heard of was suing him, claiming his project was interfering with their business operations. They demanded $1 million in damages and the immediate cessation of his hotel construction, which was quite a bold move. The company's registered address was a wasteland a few kilometers away where not a soul lived. This was clearly a malicious lawsuit. The goal was simply to stall him and drain his remaining funds, forcing him to hire a lawyer to prepare a defense. With his capital already stretched thin, this new expense was a heavy blow, leaving him with only 3 or 4 hours of sleep. He spent his days managing the site, calming the workers, and meeting with lawyers until he felt he couldn't go on. A voice told him not to fear, explaining that these 3 underhanded tactics were the standard moves of someone like Ji Buchang. Many had fallen to such tricks before, but he was told he would be different and was urged to look outside the station. Wiping away his exhaustion, Fu Qing walked to the door in confusion, seeing a line of vehicles gathered at the gas station. There were cars everywhere, filling the space as far as the eye could see, one after another in a steady line. The sheer number of vehicles was staggering, creating a scene that seemed almost impossible given the circumstances. Row upon row of cars sat there, a silent testament to something changing in the air around the project. Fu Qing wiped his eyes once more and stepped out to the entrance, still trying to make sense of what he was seeing. In the open space outside the station, dozens of workers who had just finished their shifts were huddled together with their phones. They were systematically leaving comments under every single article that had tried to smear his reputation, one by one. Their words were rough, even peppered with curses, but they knew who treated them well and were determined to stand up for him. Watching them, his tears began to well up once again, this time out of pure gratitude, as a sudden realization struck him. Ji Buchang had the money, the team, and the dirty tactics, but there was one thing he would never possess: genuine trust. He wiped his nose and walked toward them, calling out to Brother Zhang and the others, who simply grinned back at him in greeting. They told him there was no need for thanks. They simply couldn't stand seeing good people bullied, urging Fu Qing not to be afraid. With thousands of brothers standing behind him, they promised that if anyone dared touch a hair on his head, they would level their headquarters. As he looked at their honest, determined faces, the lingering confusion and fear in his heart vanished completely. Standing tall once more, he dialed the number for Manager Chun Mo at Nanxing, introducing himself as Fu Qing with renewed confidence. He acknowledged the rumors circulating online, stating clearly that he had no intention of making pointless excuses or long explanations. Instead, he extended a direct invitation for the manager and the evaluation team to conduct a field inspection of the hotel at any time. Furthermore, he proposed a gamble. If the evaluation passed, they would sign immediately, and he would offer a 20% discount for 3 years. If it failed, he would cover all their travel expenses personally. He was betting everything on his own reputation and credibility. The manager agreed to bring their most professional team, hoping not to be disappointed, to which Fu Qing firmly replied that it was a deal. After hanging up, he immediately found Uncle Zhao, telling him they had exactly 3 days to prepare for the arrival of the evaluators. He poured every cent of his remaining capital into this final sprint, focusing all resources on this one critical moment. The goal was to perfectly present the core of the hotel, the parts that truly demonstrated its value, to the visiting team. He decided to abandon the time-consuming fine decorations for now, telling everyone they weren't just renovating, they were in a fight. The workers' enthusiasm was completely ignited. Foreman Zhang and his crew even volunteered to keep working long after their shift had ended. A strange and wonderful synergy formed between the massive airport site and his hotel project as thousands of men joined the effort. By day, they sweated at the airport, and by night, they gathered at his site under temporary floodlights to continue the battle. The entire construction site remained brightly lit 24 hours a day, buzzing with an intensity that bordered on the fanatical. It was a sight that shocked everyone who saw it. 3 days later, when the Nanxing evaluation team arrived under Chun Mo's leadership, they were all utterly stunned by the scene before them. In just a few short days, everything had changed. The building had been completely transformed, with the core areas already reflecting the true essence of a 5-star hotel. Fu Qing led them up to the rooftop observation terrace, which was now furnished with comfortable outdoor seating. He extended an invitation, asking manager Chun to take a seat while he served everyone hot tea, introducing the space as they settled in. He explained that this would soon be the Cloud Hotel's executive lounge, serving as a premier viewing gallery for the airport. Every member of the Nanxing flight crew staying at the hotel would be able to enjoy top-tier views and a relaxing environment here. Chun Mo held his teacup, gazing at the massive terminal in the distance with a look of pure shock, as did his team. Meanwhile, the team members moved through every corner of the hotel with their instruments, conducting rigorous tests while Fu Qing waited anxiously. An hour later, the testing was complete. A technical lead wearing glasses walked over to Chun Mo's side. He handed over a freshly printed report, which Chun Mo began to read through with agonizing slowness, line by line. Fu Qing's palms were drenched in sweat. Finally, the manager put the report down and fixed him with a sharp, piercing gaze. He admitted that Fu Qing had performed a miracle. The quality and design exceeded their expectations, especially the soundproofing. The indoor noise was controlled at 40 decibels, a remarkable feat that finally allowed Fu Qing to breathe a sigh of relief. To achieve that silence, they had sacrificed time-consuming decorations, but in that moment, we see that the gamble had paid off. However, Chun Mo's tone suddenly shifted, noting that the hotel was still a half-finished product with many missing facilities. This didn't strictly meet their agreement. Fu Qing took a deep breath, preparing his backup plan, but then Chun Mo smiled. The manager confessed that he was personally very optimistic about the hotel's future and had decided to take a gamble of his own. With that, he pulled 2 documents from his briefcase, one of which was the formal letter of intent for their partnership. The other document, however, was a private angel investment agreement, as Chun Mo calmly explained to him. We see that this letter of intent could be signed immediately, representing the official stance of Nanxing Airlines. It would help him withstand a great deal of outside pressure, and then Chun Mo pushed the second document forward. As for this investment agreement, it was a personal contribution of 1 million in his wife's name for the hotel. It was meant to help him through this crisis and finish the hotel. No shares were required, only repayment once profitable. Fu Qing had never imagined, even in his wildest dreams, that the manager would support him in such a way. His voice trembled as he asked why, and Chun Mo took a sip of tea, his gaze drifting toward the horizon. He admitted that in Fu Qing, he saw a shadow of his younger self, having nothing, yet daring to challenge the world. He didn't want to see such a dream strangled in its cradle by dirty capital, and Fu Qing felt a sudden warmth in his eyes. He stood and bowed deeply, thanking manager Chun and swearing to himself that he would never betray this trust. That afternoon, on the rooftop of his half-finished hotel, our protagonist signed that $1 million agreement. At the very moment his pen touched the paper, he received a message from Su, one that changed everything. It seemed the chairman of Shibua had begun a hostile takeover of their bank shares on the secondary market. The man was trying to force her out, and as Fu Qing looked at the horizon, he knew the final battle had begun. Manager Chun Mo's private investment was like a shot of adrenaline into his nearly exhausted capital chain. But Suwon's text felt like a bucket of ice water poured over his head, chilling him to the bone. He knew that Suwon had become a target solely because of him, so he immediately dialed her number. The phone rang for a long time before she answered, her voice sounding exhausted as she mentioned she was in a meeting. He urged her to keep it brief and asked if she was all right, but Suwon interrupted him before he could finish. She spoke with a forced lightness, telling him it was just a normal business struggle and that he shouldn't worry. She insisted she could handle it, telling him that finishing the hotel was the best way to support her against people like Ji Buchang. If his project succeeded, it would prove her judgment right, leaving the old fossils on the bank's board with nothing to say. Fu Qing knew she was only trying to comfort him. In reality, Ji Buochang was using his massive capital to pressure the entire bank. His goal was to force them to sacrifice Su Wan as the fall person for the loan, so Fu Qing spoke softly into the phone. He whispered an apology, and after a brief silence on the other end, Su Wan reminded him that they were friends. She told him her help wasn't an investment but an act of trust, and that everyone would only win if he succeeded. She hung up after promising to stay in touch, leaving the words friendship and trust echoing in his mind. Those words weighed on his heart like a mountain. He couldn't lose, not just for his hotel, but for Su Wan's entire career. We returned to the construction site, where Uncle Zhao and the workers were anxiously waiting for any news of the result. They crowded around him, asking what the people from Nanxing had said, and Fu Qing carefully tucked his emotions away. He forced a smile and announced that the airline was satisfied and would be signing a letter of intent with them. A massive cheer erupted across the site, as the hard work of the past few days had finally yielded a reward. Seeing their simple, honest smiles, he declared on the spot that every worker's salary for this month would be doubled. Even the airport workers who came to help would receive a 1,000 yuan bonus, and the very next day, Chenmo transferred the investment. The legal department also sent the signed letter of intent. With Nanxing's official backing, the rumors of illegal construction vanished. To be honest, it was the perfect shield, so he immediately called Director Qin Shou to make his next move. He asked to hold a press conference in the name of the airport headquarters, which left Qin Shou momentarily stunned and confused. Fu Qing explained that it was time for the Cloud Hotel to make its official debut alongside their partnership with Nanxing Airlines. He intended to invite every major journalist from the city and the province to witness the truth for themselves. He would explain the hotel's origins and make the cooperation agreement and all legal documents public for the entire world to see. Qin Shou immediately understood the intention. He realized Fu Qing wanted to use the enemy's own momentum to completely flip the public narrative. Fu Qing answered slowly and deliberately, stating that he was tired of playing hide-and-seek with his detractors. He wanted to lay all his cards on the table. Since they wanted to make him famous, he decided to give them exactly what they asked for. He would become famous on his own terms, leaving Qin Shou silent on the other end of the line for a long moment. To be honest, this was a significant risk for the director as well, as any mistake at the press conference would fall on his shoulders. Finally, he made up his mind, telling Fu Qing that the airport project needed a partner with his kind of resolve. He agreed that Anning Town needed this vitality, promising to contact the media and provide the airport headquarters conference room. The date was set for 3 days later, with a shared promise to fight this battle for their reputation together. Those 3 days passed in a flash, and thanks to Qin Shou's extensive network, nearly every prominent media outlet in the city was invited. At 10 in the morning, the conference officially began, and we see Fu Qing take a deep breath before stepping up to the podium. He greeted the media and guests, introducing himself as the founder of the Cloud Hotel while acknowledging the recent online rumors. He noted that some called him mysterious, while others claimed the source of his funding was suspicious or even illegal. There were even claims that his building was an eyesore next to the airport, but he stood there today to prove none of it was true. He described himself as just an ordinary boy from Anning Town whose parents had passed away, leaving him only the old family house. When the town was demolished and his home was the only one left outside the red line, he didn't complain. He felt fate had kept him there for a reason. He explained how he used his inheritance and a 300,000 yuan bank loan to gather the initial capital to rebuild. His dream was to transform an abandoned house into a hotel serving the new airport, giving it the name Cloud. He hoped it would soar toward the clouds and a brighter future, just like the planes nearby, speaking with a calm and steady voice. He wasn't trying to be overly emotional. He was simply stating the facts of a young man protecting his home and chasing a dream. The room gradually fell silent as many journalists put down their pens, captivated by the sincerity of his story. As the room listened in silence, Fu Qing continued, stating that every cent of his funding was clean, including the loan from his friend at the bank. He noted that this friend was now suffering unjust accusations for simply being professional, as we see him look towards Su Wan in a quiet corner. Her eyes were slightly red as he declared that every single step of his construction had been perfectly legal and compliant with all regulations. Director Qin Shou of the airport headquarters, who had personally supervised the project's quality, nodded back at him with an encouraging gaze. Fu Qing insisted that his future was not that of a lonely holdout, as some had claimed, but something far more collaborative. He revealed that he had already reached a preliminary strategic partnership with manager Chen Mo of Southern Airlines. Turning toward the display board and the letter of intent on the wall, he explained that this place would soon become a vital hub. It was destined to be the warmest harbor for Southern Airlines flight crews, a revelation that caused an immediate stir throughout the room. An official partnership with a major airline was easily the biggest news of the day, making all previous doubts seem utterly pale and weak. He pointed toward Uncle Zhao and Zhang Gongtong in the front row, responding calmly that he possessed no mysterious or hidden background. He claimed only a heart that wanted to do something for his hometown, supported by the very land he loved so dearly. He credited the leaders who supported him, the partners who trusted him, and the workers who had bled and sweated alongside him. The conference then moved to the Q&A session, where a male reporter stood up to ask a sharp, pointed question to Fu Qing. The reporter noted the mention of the bank friend suppression, pointing out that a firm called Huayu Capital was currently attempting a hostile takeover. He added that the media outlets smearing Fu Qing's name were also linked to Huayu Capital, asking if this was a targeted, malicious business attack. With every eye in the room fixed on him, Fu Qing remained silent for a moment before clearly stating that there are two types of people. One type sees value and finds ways to create and protect it, while the other only thinks of how to plunder and destroy it. He declared that the Cloud Hotel welcomes all creators, but will always keep its doors closed to greedy predators, a bold stance, to be sure. He expressed his firm belief that under the light of day, all conspiracies and schemes would eventually have nowhere to hide. As he finished, the room erupted into thunderous applause, and by that afternoon, the news regarding the Cloud Hotel began to spread rapidly. The news swept across every front page in the city, and we see Fu Qing's image shift from a controversial holdout to something new. He was now being hailed as a legendary entrepreneurial pioneer, a man who dared to take on massive projects single-handedly. He became the face of a youth who refused to bow to capital, but the very next day, trouble arrived as expected. Early that morning, Uncle Zhao ran over in a panic, shouting that the hotel's water had been cut off, causing Fu Qing's heart to sink. He asked what was happening, since they had paid the water bills on time, and Uncle Zhao confirmed that they certainly had. However, the town's water plant claimed that the main pipes in this specific area required a full week of maintenance. It was a classic, underhanded tactic used to harass local businesses, and without water, everything was at a standstill. The final renovation work had to stop, and even worse, the gas station could no longer operate normally either. Fu Qing immediately thought of Qin Shou, but before he could even call him, an unexpected visitor arrived at his door. The man introduced himself as Wang Weigua, the former chairman of the once mighty Hongta Group. The name Hongta Group sounded familiar to us. It was once a very famous local real estate company in the city. But a few years ago, it reportedly went bankrupt overnight due to a broken capital chain, and now Weigua looked on with a complex gaze. He told Fu Qing that he had come specifically to share a certain piece of information with him. The boss of Huayu Capital who was currently pushing Fu Qing into a corner was a man named Ji Buochang. This was the same man who used those very same tactics to ruin Weigua, making Fu Qing realize this man was a natural ally. Curious, Fu Qing asked Chairman Wang to explain exactly what had happened back then. Weigua fell into a painful memory of when he was developing a large commercial complex, much like Fu Qing is doing now. He had invested his entire fortune into it, but just as the project was nearing completion, Ji Buochang suddenly appeared. He presented himself as a savior, yet he used the situation to swoop in and offer less than 30% of the actual value. In the end, he acquired all of Weigua's shares and the nearly finished project for a fraction of what they were worth. He explained how he went from being a billionaire to a man with nothing but debt. Wang Weigua's story was a cautionary tale of a fall from grace that felt all too familiar. We see that what Fu Qing is experiencing now is almost identical, though Weigua's end was far more tragic. Weigua pulled a thick stack of documents from his briefcase, explaining that he had spent years preparing for this. He had been collecting evidence of Ji Buochang's crimes, noting that the man was ruthless but far too overconfident. Many of his shady deals had left a trail, all conducted through a shell company registered overseas. Buochang thought he was being clever, but the very person who helped him set it all up was now an informant. Weigua had planted that person by his side, and now he held evidence of massive tax evasion. There were records of illegal asset transfers and bribery, any one of which could ruin Buochang forever. As Fu Qing looked at the documents, his breathing quickened. This wasn't just paper, it was a weapon. It was a blade meant to strike Buochang down, and Fu Qing urgently asked why Weigua hadn't used it yet. Weigua shook his head bitterly, explaining that a bankrupt old man like him had no power against Buochang's connections. Every time he tried to submit the materials, they simply vanished, and then he looked up with a burning gaze. He told Fu Qing that things were different for him, because he had the airport project backing him up. With Southern Airlines involved, Fu Qing had the kind of public attention and influence that Buochang couldn't ignore. In Weigua's hands, this evidence was just scrap metal, but in Fu Qing's hands, it was something else entirely. He believed it could be the sword that finally cuts off the dragon's head. To be honest, it was a heavy burden. Fu Qing realized Weigua wasn't asking for help. He was entrusting his last hope for revenge to him. And right at that pivotal moment, Qin Shou called him, breaking the heavy silence of the room. Knowing the moment to strike back had arrived, Fu Qing looked up with firm resolve and accepted the challenge. Fu Qing promised himself that justice might be delayed, but it would certainly arrive for the investigation team. The news of the team entering Anning Town spread faster than a water outage notice, and Zheng Daqian was interrogated for 5 hours. When he finally emerged, his once arrogant authority had completely vanished, and half an hour later, the construction site's faucets began to flow with clear water once again. That night, Fu Qing locked himself in his office with Wang Weigua's documents. He knew he had to find a way to pin Bochang down, so he couldn't struggle, so he called Su Wan. He told Su Wan he needed her help to contact an absolutely reliable provincial media outlet with significant influence. Su Wan immediately understood his intent and asked if he planned to blow the whole thing wide open. Deep down, he was weighing his options, wondering just how much he should let the enemy see at this stage. He considered the risks of revealing his hand too early, knowing that timing was everything in a fight like this. It was a delicate game of cat and mouse, and he needed to be sure of his next move before proceeding. He reiterated that he needed a provincial media outlet that was both trustworthy and powerful enough to make an impact. Su Wan asked again if he wanted to destroy him, as Fu Qing looked out at Zheng Daqian's darkened office building. In the silence of the night, he answered firmly that this wasn't just about destruction, it was about judgment. She suggested a producer from the provincial TV station's focus tracking program, an upright senior from her university days. This producer hated the dark side of the capital markets, and their show was the highest-rated investigative program in the province. Anyone targeted by them was usually finished. Fu Qing then sorted through the massive pile of documents to find the key evidence. He found clear records of illegal profits made through overseas shell companies, but he chose not to reveal all his cards yet. To deal with an old fox like Ji Bochang, he had to peel away his disguises layer by layer, like an onion. He wanted Bochang to feel endless fear, so he sent the encrypted files to the focus tracking team. He didn't sign his name, only writing a single sentence at the end of the email. This is only the beginning. 2 days later, the provincial TV station's focus tracking program aired right on time, featuring a title that was nothing short of explosive. It was called Ji Bochang's Secret Wealth Empire, and the program moved with the gripping rhythm of a suspense thriller, using detailed data and expert interviews. We see the evidence Fu Qing provided being peeled back layer by layer, presented clearly before millions of viewers across the entire province. The host asked in a cold, piercing tone why our capital markets had become a lawless ATM for certain individuals. He questioned why our regulatory systems seemed to turn a blind eye to such blatant illegal activities. Deep down, Fu Qing knew that the end for Ji Bochang had finally begun. To be honest, it was a long time coming. That night, the official website of Huayu Capital was paralyzed by a flood of panicked investors, and the next day, their stock hit the limit down immediately. Massive sell orders poured in like a waterfall, sealing off any chance of escape, while Ji Bochang's phone was practically ringing off the hook. There were interrogations, insults, and demands to withdraw capital or terminate contracts. The business empire he had painstakingly built for years was reeling. After just one weekend, signs of a total collapse began to appear, and the final straw that broke the camel's back came from Anning Town. On his third day of isolated investigation, Zheng Daqian finally buckled under the pressure and gave up Ji Bochang. He confessed everything, including how he conspired with Bochang to seize Fu Qing's land and exactly how many bribes he had accepted. He detailed all the dirty work he had performed in the shadows, and the investigation team soon discovered the company he co-owned with Bochang's brother. The business was called Anning Empty Space Service Company, Limited, and shortly after, Zheng Daqian was officially handed over to the judicial authorities. That evening, the gas station closed early and the workers returned to their dorms, but Fu Qing stayed in the office to check the accounts for new materials. Uncle Zhao, worried about leaving him alone, decided to stay behind as well. It was a quiet moment, or so it seemed. Looking out at the torrential rain, Uncle Zhao remarked with concern that the weather felt wrong, as if something bad was about to happen. Fu Qing also felt a strange, inexplicable irritability, and right then, the office door was kicked open as a terrified security guard rushed in. He shouted that a mob had arrived with weapons, smashing everything and everyone in sight, and that they couldn't be stopped. Uncle Zhao stood up instantly, grabbing a shovel from the corner with a curse. It seems the fight had come to their doorstep. He actually dared to come here and seek his own death. Fu Qing's heart sank, but he quickly regained his composure and told Uncle Zhao to call the police. The security guard replied with a tremble in his voice that it was too late. They had already smashed all the phones. It seemed they had a plan. They intended to destroy the entire construction site, and Fu Qing realized instantly that Ji Bochang was playing for keeps this time. These weren't just street thugs, but professional rioters whose sole purpose was to cause the maximum amount of destruction possible. If the site was ruined or lives were lost, his hotel project would be finished forever, a fact Bochang knew all too well. Making a split-second decision, he told Uncle Zhao to hold the gate without fighting head-on, prompting the old man to ask what he would do. He told him he was going for help. Outside, the piercing sound of smashing and arrogant shouting echoed from the direction of the hotel building. Over a dozen dark figures armed with machetes and iron bars were frantically destroying the glass curtain walls he had just finished installing. Suddenly, a pair of blinding headlights flashed behind him as an unlicensed black van sped directly toward him at full throttle. They wanted him dead. His mind went blank for a second, but in that spark of time, Foreman Zhang suddenly lunged from the side. The foreman shoved him out of the way, shouting for the boss to run, just before his own body was sent flying like a ragdoll by the impact. The van didn't slow down for even a second, continuing to accelerate into the darkness as if nothing had happened. With tears and rain blurring his vision, Fu Qing knew he couldn't leave. If he ran, Uncle Zhao would be defenseless and Zhang's sacrifice would be in vain. A surge of unprecedented fury and killing intent rose from the depths of his heart as he looked at the thugs still smashing his property. His gaze became as cold as Antarctic ice. Instead of heading for his own car, he made a different choice. He turned and sprinted toward the idle bulldozer sitting in the corner of the site. A machine foreman Zhang had taught him how to operate. He started the engine, and the steel beast roared to life in the rainy night, emitting a deafening growl that shook the ground. The rioters were startled by the sudden, thunderous noise as we see Fu Qing steering the massive bulldozer toward them. He advanced slowly but with an irresistible, crushing pressure, prompting one thug to scream in terror that he was a madman. Yes, a madman indeed. Terrified out of their wits, the mob scattered in every direction, and for now, he didn't bother to chase them. Just then, we see a dozen police cars with flashing red and blue lights tearing through the rainy night, sirens wailing. Qin Shou and Su Wan rushed out of the lead car, only to find Foreman Zhang lying in a pool of blood amidst the wreckage. They also spotted Fu Qing sitting in the bulldozer's cab, and Su Wan ran toward him, her voice trembling as she called his name. She begged him to come down and make sure he was all right, and he jumped from the high cab, falling heavily into her arms. He whispered to her that he hadn't killed anyone, and Su Wan held him tightly, her voice choking up as she told him she knew. She kept repeating that it was over and that everything would be all right now, trying to soothe the storm inside him. But deep down, he knew it wasn't over. From this night on, it was a fight to the death between him and Ji Buochang. Foreman Zhang was rushed to the city's best hospital, where doctors found severe blood loss and a broken leg, though he was stable. As he waited in the hospital corridor, the image of the foreman being sent flying by the van played on a loop in his mind. While Su Wan draped her coat over his shoulders, Qin Shou was on the phone constantly, as Chun Boying had also been informed. Boying used his connections to pressure the authorities, demanding a full investigation into Ji Buochang's reckless and violent assault. Buochang's move had cost Fu Qing dearly, but it also shattered all unspoken rules, turning the villain into an enemy of the state. The police launched an overnight manhunt, quickly capturing the dozen thugs at various checkpoints as they tried to flee the city. The unlicensed van that struck Foreman Zhang was eventually found abandoned in a quarry, and the interrogations began immediately. Under immense pressure and faced with undeniable evidence, the thugs soon confessed that their employer was Buochang's most trusted assistant. This assistant was the man who handled all of Buochang's dirty work, but when the police arrived, he chose to take his own life. He likely thought this would protect his boss, but he underestimated Fu Qing and the explosive files Wang Weigua had provided. Turning to his friends, Fu Qing asked Su Wan to contact the producer of the investigative show Focus Tracking immediately. He then asked Qin Shou to arrange a meeting with the Discipline Inspection Commission, preparing his final move for the next morning. He made 2 copies of the files. One went to the provincial TV station, and the other was delivered to the commission's top official. Immediately after, a massive anti-corruption storm began to sweep through the province's financial and political circles. The Focus Tracking production team spent an entire week creating a 1-hour special, setting a new historical record for the show. In just a few days, the opposition collapsed entirely, and once the dust settled, everyone who had helped him gathered together. He looked out at the Anning International Airport, now officially open and bustling with activity, without making any grand or boastful speeches. Instead, he simply gave a deep bow of gratitude, thanking them all because the clouds belonged to everyone now. We returned to the hotel's rooftop terrace, which had now become the most expensive and beautiful vantage point in all of Anning Town. Su Wan walked over and handed him a glass of champagne, teasingly saying that he finally looked like a successful man, her dear Fu Qing. She told him that he hadn't just built a hotel, he had fundamentally changed this place and the lives of many people. He smiled as he watched the brilliant lights of his hotel and the arriving guests, knowing the abandoned orphan had finally found a home. Ji Buochang's successor was a middle-aged official named Zhao Fuming, who had been brought in from the city to take over. Representing young entrepreneurs, Fu Qing attended a seminar on Anning Town's future development that lasted the entire morning. During the meeting, Zhao Fuming was generous with his praise, noting that Fu Qing's Cloud Hotel had set an incredible precedent. He stated that Fu Qing had proven that with enough vision and courage, this land could produce world-class results. The official explained that all future planning for the region would now follow the high standards set by the Cloud Hotel. Their goal was to transform the area into a hotspot for investment, a place where talent would truly want to stay and build a life. As the meeting concluded, Zhao Fuming shook Fu Qing's hand sincerely, acknowledging that the town had treated him unfairly in the past. He promised that the town now needed Fu Qing's leadership and offered full support for any future needs he might have. Looking at the spark in the official's eyes, Fu Qing could see that a new era was beginning for them all. He knew that spring had truly arrived in Anning Town, as the hotel business flourished and other airlines began seeking partnerships. Word of mouth spread, and soon various business conferences and industry forums were choosing his hotel as their primary venue. Holding meetings at the Clouds became a new trend in the city's business circles, while the gas station he built was far from forgotten. He upgraded and renovated it into a semi-open American-style plaza, though it still maintained its affordable, community-friendly prices. With its rugged, welcoming atmosphere, it became the favorite late-night dining spot for airport ground staff and local residents alike. Fu Qing officially hired Uncle Wong as the hotel's director of engineering, putting him in charge of all facility maintenance and management. The old crew became the technical backbone of various departments, each of them now proudly wearing their brand-new uniforms. They were now formal employees of a five-star hotel. Even Wang Weigua came to visit, bowing deeply the moment he saw Fu Qing. The man thanked him for the second chance, but Fu Qing quickly reached out to help him up, refusing to accept such a heavy gesture. He told Uncle Wong that he had only done what was right, and that it was actually the older man's support that provided the strength to finally cut through the darkness. Wong then revealed he planned to use his recovered funds to start a legal aid foundation. His goal was to help entrepreneurs who, like them, had been bullied by predatory capital. He patted Fu Qing's shoulder with a look of relief. He admitted he no longer had the strength to fight them, but noted that the future of this world belonged to Fu Qing's generation now. As Fu Qing saw him off, he watched the man's back, no longer hunched, but standing straight once more, disappear into the crowd. We see that an old era had finally come to an end, and with the hotel running smoothly, Fu Qing finally had a moment for himself. The first thing he did was transfer Zhang Gantu from a general ward to the best VIP recovery center in the city hospital. He took it upon himself to cover every single expense. When he went to visit, Zhang was lying in bed, looking quite surprised. The man nearly jumped out of bed in excitement, asking Boss Fu why he had come all this way for such a minor injury. Fu Qing placed a bouquet of flowers by the bedside and told Brother Zhang that this was certainly not a minor injury. He reminded him that he had risked his life, and while the doctor said his leg was healing well, it would still take a long time. He told him to rest easy without any worries, as his salary would continue and all medical bills were fully covered by the hotel. This tough northern man, who never complained about hardship, choked up like a child and said it was all worth it as Fu Qing patted his shoulder. He promised that from now on, it would be his turn to protect their home. After leaving the hospital, Fu Qing received a call from Su Wan. The Cloud Hotel loan project she managed had become famous at the head office. Far from being punished, she was being celebrated. Instead, she received an exceptional promotion, becoming the youngest branch president in the bank's history. She laughed over the phone and asked, "President Fu, are you free tonight? I'd like to treat you to dinner. Where would you like to go?" He suggested the presidential suite at his own Cloud Hotel. That evening, he had the kitchen prepare the most exquisite dinner available. The meal was delivered to the top-floor suite, a room he specifically reserved for Su Wan and never opened to the public. On the terrace, one could overlook the entire night view of the airport New City. When Su Wan saw him arrive, she smiled warmly at him. She remarked that the view here was still the best. He joked back that of course it was, considering whose territory they were standing on. They didn't talk about work or the heart-pounding events of the past. We see them acting simply like two old friends who hadn't met in years. They sipped tea and chatted about trivial things until she suddenly looked at him seriously. "Hey Qing, do you remember when you decided to build this?" She reminded him of her request for a lifetime free presidential suite once he opened. He listened and nodded, remembering the moment well. He told her he was now fulfilling that promise. Su Wan laughed self-deprecatingly, admitting she had actually been joking at the time. She confessed she thought he was crazy to start a hotel with 50,000 in a wasteland everyone else was fleeing. She hadn't believed in him. She had only helped because she didn't want to see him lose too badly, even preparing to cover some of his losses. He listened in silence. She told him he had turned an impossible dream into reality, proving to be far more capable than she had ever imagined. Then, she stood up and walked directly over to stand in front of him. She didn't offer a verbal answer, but instead slowly gave him a kiss. Afterward, she held him, her voice trembling with a slight rasp. "Hey Qing, I want you," she whispered. "It's you that I want." His tears fell without warning. He smiled and nodded vigorously, agreeing to her heart. That night, they talked long into the night about their visions for the future. Soon, the second anniversary of the Anning International Airport's opening arrived. It was also the second anniversary of the Cloud Hotel's opening, a celebration where business elites, government officials, and leaders gathered together. We see Fu Qing dressed in a custom black suit, with Su Wan on his arm, standing at the banquet hall entrance to welcome every guest. Su Wan had officially resigned from the bank to become the CEO of the Cloud Group, handling all the complex business affairs on his behalf. This allowed him to focus more on the group's strategic development. Qin Shou arrived as well, now serving as the director of the new city management committee. She had become the true leader of this new city. When she saw him, she smiled and called out to President Fu. She joked that he was now the biggest god of wealth in their new city. Chen Emo also made a special trip, flying in all the way from Guangzhou. Now the vice president of Southern Airlines, he gave Fu Qing a warm embrace the moment they met. "Fu Qing," he said warmly, "the most successful investment I have ever made in my entire life was 2 years ago. when I gave you that 1 million on that rooftop. Uncle Zhao and Zhang Gongtu stood proudly behind him as well. One was the director of engineering and the other the director of security. As the banquet began, Fu Qing took the stage as the host. He reminded everyone that 2 years ago, when he stood in this very spot, the ground beneath his feet was nothing but ruins. He admitted that back then, he felt as though the whole world had abandoned him. But today, he stood there once again. Now, he was standing at the most prosperous heart of the entire airport new city. He told the crowd that he had something important to say. He believed that what determines our value is never which line we are drawn outside of by others. Instead, it is where we choose to draw our own new starting line. Even if the world abandons you, you can choose to welcome the world back on your own terms. His speech was brief, a rare thing for such events. Yet it earned the most enthusiastic applause of the night. Before the banquet even ended, he took Suwon's hand, and they quietly slipped out. They changed into casual clothes, walking through the park like any ordinary couple. We see children laughing and playing nearby, and elderly people exercising. Suddenly, he spotted a familiar figure. Lin Shen was there, taking his young grandson down a slide. Lin Shen looked awkward and restless when he saw him, stammering that Fu Qing really was a big boss now, unlike before. Lin Shen apologized for his past loose talk, asking him not to take it to heart. He simply shook his head, as those days were long gone. At that moment, the little grandson ran over and looked at him with curiosity. Lin Shen quickly told the boy that this man was the pride of their new city. He introduced him as the president of the Cloud Hotel, telling the child that when he grew up, he should be just as successful as President Fu. He smiled, handed a piece of candy to the child, and they continued their walk until they reached the site where his old home once stood. Today, that spot had been transformed into a beautiful rooftop garden within the hotel complex. We see him and Suwon sitting together on a garden bench. In the distance, a massive airliner was slowly descending toward the runway, its lights streaking across the night sky like a falling star. Suddenly, Suwon spoke up. She asked him if he had any regrets. He looked at the plane landing smoothly and gazed out at the thousands of lights from the homes in the distance. Looking at the woman he loved by his side, he whispered softly that he had never regretted a single thing. And truly, who could blame him?